Comanche girl tied to a tree for the wild beasts, until a rancher saved her with a bullet. Yana was only 12, but she carried the spirit of her Comanche ancestors with her every step. The morning sun stretched across the endless plains, painting the tall grass with golden light. Birds sang from the trees, and the wind whispered through the leaves. Today, she had been sent by her mother to collect herbs and roots from the far side of the forest, a task she had done many times before. Her small basket swung at her side, and her eyes carefully scanned the ground for the plants her mother had taught her to recognize. The forest was beautiful, almost magical to Yana. She loved the way the sunlight fell through the branches, making patterns on the ground. She felt at home among the trees and the animals that lived there. Rabbits darted between the bushes, squirrels chattered from the branches, and a distant deer lifted its head to watch her pass. She moved quietly, careful not to scare the creatures, feeling a sense of connection to everything around her. But as she went deeper into the woods, a strange feeling began to creep over her. The birds' songs grew quiet, and the rustling of leaves seemed louder than usual. Something was not right. Yana paused, looking around. The forest, which had always seemed friendly and safe, suddenly felt darker, more dangerous. Her heart beat a little faster, and she gripped her basket tightly. She reminded herself to stay calm. Her mother had taught her that fear could make even the simplest task dangerous. Suddenly, from behind a thick cluster of bushes, a shadow moved. Yana froze. Before she could run, a strong hand grabbed her shoulder. She struggled, but the grip was firm. Panic surged through her chest. She realized she had been caught by someone, not an animal, but a person. Her eyes widened as she looked up at the face of a stranger. He was not from her village. The man spoke something in a harsh voice, but Yana did not understand. She tried to break free, twisting and kicking, but it was no use. They dragged her through the underbrush, and she stumbled over roots and rocks. She cried out for her mother, but her voice was swallowed by the thick trees. The forest that had once been a place of wonder now seemed like a trap. She felt fear like she had never felt before, cold and sharp, running down her spine. Her mind raced. She thought of the stories her elders told, the stories of rival tribes and dangers in the wilderness. Could this be one of those dangers? She did not know what would happen to her. Eventually, they reached a clearing at the edge of the forest. There, a large tree stood alone, its branches spreading wide as if to protect or threaten whoever stood beneath it. Yana's captors forced her to sit and then tied her to the tree with strong ropes. Her wrists hurt, the fibers cutting into her skin, but she did not scream. She was terrified, yes, but she knew that panicking would not help her. She sat quietly, her mind racing to find a way out. The sun continued to rise higher, and the heat began to press down on her small shoulders. She looked around the clearing. The grass swayed gently, but she could feel the eyes of unseen creatures watching her. Somewhere in the distance she could hear the growl of wolves. Her stomach twisted. She remembered her mother's words. Yana, the forest can be your friend or your enemy. Respect it and it will protect you. Fear it and it will test you. She tried to calm her trembling hands and focused on those words. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig made her jump. She could feel the presence of wild animals nearby. Wolves, coyotes, maybe even a bear, all were drawn to the scent of fear. Yana hugged herself, wishing she had not wandered so far from home, but she also felt a small spark of determination. She could not give up. She would survive. She had survived storms, injuries, and long journeys before. She had the strength of her people inside her. Hours passed. The captors had gone, leaving her alone with the ropes and the tree. The forest grew darker as clouds drifted across the sun. Shadows stretched long across the ground. Yana tried to untie the ropes with her small hands, but they were tied too tightly. She tried biting them, pulling them, twisting her wrists, but it was no use. Each failed attempt made her heart ache with frustration, but she refused to give up. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. As the day turned into afternoon, Ayana noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. A fox darted across the grass and a deer watched from a distance. She remembered that animals could sense danger, and if they were uneasy, it meant she had to be even more careful. She spoke softly to herself, as her mother had taught. "I am strong. I will survive. I will find a way." Her voice, though trembling, gave her a sense of comfort. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to breathe deeply, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat, steady and strong. The wind shifted, carrying new sounds. The growls grew closer, and Ayana could see shadows moving between the trees. Her fear surged again, but this time she used it. She focused on the movements, trying to understand the patterns, watching the animals, learning their behavior. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl was a clue. She realized that she could survive if she stayed calm, if she stayed smart. Night was approaching, and the clearing grew cold. Yana shivered but did not cry. She wrapped her arms around herself and thought about her village, her family, and the people who would miss her. She imagined her mother's face, her gentle hands, and felt a flicker of hope. Somewhere out there, someone might come to help her. She could not see them yet, but the possibility kept her spirit alive. As darkness fell, the forest became alive with sounds of nocturnal creatures. The snapping of twigs, the rustling of leaves, the low growls in the distance, all reminded her that the night was dangerous. Yet Ayana did not give in to despair. She thought of the stories of brave warriors and wise elders, and she imagined herself following in their footsteps. She imagined that she was not a helpless girl, but someone who could endure, someone who could survive against the odds. Hours dragged on, and Ayana began to feel the cold biting into her bones. She tried to stay alert, listening to every sound, every movement. Her hands were raw from the ropes, but she refused to stop trying to loosen them. She looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle above, and for a moment she felt a strange sense of peace. The universe seemed vast, yet she was a part of it. She drew strength from that thought, knowing that she had faced challenges before and could face this one too. By the time the moon rose high, casting a silver glow over the clearing, Ayana was exhausted but still determined. She had learned much in that one terrifying day. She had learned patience, courage, and the importance of staying calm in the face of danger. She had learned that fear could be a guide if she listened carefully, not a chain to hold her down. And most importantly, she had learned that hope was not a weakness, but a powerful force that could keep her alive even when everything seemed lost. As she settled against the tree for the night, she whispered a promise to herself. "I will survive. I will see my family again. I will not give up." The night was long, the forest alive with danger, but Ayana's spirit burned bright. She was only a girl, but in that moment she was also a warrior, ready to face whatever came next. The night was dark, but the forest was alive. Ayana could hear every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, and the distant howls of wolves. Her small body trembled from cold and fear, but her mind remained sharp. She knew she could not afford to panic. Every movement, every sound could be a warning. She pressed her back against the rough bark of the tree, trying to make herself as small and quiet as possible. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The stars shone above, pale and distant, while the shadows beneath the trees seemed to move with a life of their own. Ayana's heart pounded in her chest as the forest seemed to grow larger, more threatening with every passing minute. She hugged herself tightly, wishing she could feel her mother's comforting presence. Yet despite the fear, there was a spark of determination in her eyes. She knew she had to survive, no matter what. The ropes around her wrists cut into her skin, and her hands were raw. She tried again to loosen them, twisting and pulling with all her strength. Her fingers ached, but she refused to stop. She remembered the stories her grandfather had told her about the Comanche warriors who had faced impossible odds. They had survived through clever thinking, patience, and courage. Yana told herself she could do the same. She would not let fear control her. As she struggled, she noticed small signs in the forest. A branch bent slightly, as if something had passed through it. The sound of breathing came from the shadows, not human but animal. Yana's senses sharpened. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her: observe everything, learn from the forest, and use it to your advantage. Even though she was young, she could think carefully. She could listen carefully. She could stay alive. The night deepened and the wind carried with it new sounds. A fox crossed the clearing, pausing for a moment to glance at her with curious eyes. In the distance, the low growl of a wolf made her shiver. She knew the wolf could hear her fear, smell it even, but she tried to steady her breathing. She whispered quietly to herself, repeating her promise: I will survive. I will find a way. I will not give up. Hours passed slowly, and Ayana felt the hunger gnawing at her stomach. She had eaten nothing since morning, and her body ached from exhaustion. Yet, even with the pain and fatigue, she refused to let despair take over. She remembered the herbs she had been collecting, how they could heal, how they could give strength. Though she had none with her now, she drew comfort from the thought that she had knowledge, and knowledge was a tool for survival. Her eyes scanned the forest continuously. She noticed small signs of movement: the flick of a tail, the glint of eyes, the soft padding of paws. Every sound was a clue. She learned quickly that the forest was both enemy and ally. It hid danger, yes, but it also gave warning. If she paid attention, she could survive. If she ignored it, she would not. Yana stayed focused, every sense alert, every thought calculated. Suddenly she heard the distinct sound of voices carried by the wind. They were faint and distant, but they were human. Yana's heart leaped. Could it be help? Or were they more captors? She did not know, but the sound gave her hope. She called out softly, "Hello, please." Someone. Her voice was small, trembling, but it carried through the trees. There was no response, only the whisper of the wind. She whispered again, louder this time, "Please, help me." The forest answered with silence. For a moment, despair threatened to creep back, but she pushed it aside. She reminded herself of her promise. She would survive. Someone might come. She could not give up hope. She focused again on the sounds around her: the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of wolves, the occasional snap of a twig. Each sound was a signal, a warning, a clue. Hours dragged into deep night. The cold bit at her skin, and the forest seemed darker than ever. Yana shivered, hugging herself tightly. Yet in the quiet darkness she noticed something unusual. The wind shifted, carrying a scent that was not of the forest. It was different, faint but distinct: smoke and the faint smell of leather. She lifted her head, sniffing the air. Her instincts, honed by years of listening to the forest, told her it was not danger but someone coming. Her heart raced. Could it be a rescuer? She tried to make herself as visible as possible, shifting slightly against the tree without making noise. She whispered to herself, "Please come this way. Please help me." She felt a small surge of hope, a fragile flame that refused to die despite the fear and the darkness. She had survived this long by staying calm, by observing, by thinking. Perhaps now help was on the way. Minutes seemed like hours as she waited. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow made her tense. Then she heard it, a soft footfall on the dry leaves. Someone was moving carefully through the forest, but they were close. Her heart pounded. She called out softly, "Over here." "Please help me." The voice that answered was not harsh or threatening, but firm and strong. "Hold still. I'm coming." Yana's relief was overwhelming. She tried to shift, to move toward the voice, but the ropes held her fast. The sound of human footsteps grew closer, and she could hear the soft whisper of a voice encouraging her. "Don't worry, little one. You're safe now. I'll get you out." The reassurance in the voice gave her strength, and she felt a tear roll down her cheek. She had thought she would be alone forever, but now hope had arrived in human form. The footsteps stopped, and she heard the soft crunch of a knife cutting through the ropes. Iana's wrists were freed and she rubbed them, feeling the blood flow back. She was weak from exhaustion and fear, but she was alive. The figure helping her stepped into the moonlight. He was a rancher, rugged and strong, with eyes that showed determination and kindness. He extended a hand and Iana grasped it, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. The rancher helped her to her feet. "You're safe now," he said gently. "I've got you." Iana could barely speak, her voice trembling. Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, understanding her exhaustion. "We need to get out of here quickly," he said. "There's still danger in the forest tonight." Iana nodded, trusting him completely. She felt the weight of fear lift slightly, replaced by gratitude and the first signs of hope she had felt in hours. As they moved carefully through the forest together, Iana could hear the distant sounds of wolves, but they kept their distance. The rancher led her along a path he knew, guiding her with skill and care. She clung to his hand, feeling safer with every step. Her mind replayed the events of the day, the capture, the fear, the struggle against the ropes. She realized how strong she had been, how carefully she had observed, how determined she had been to survive. By the time they emerged from the forest, the first light of dawn was touching the horizon. The plains stretched before them, calm and golden. Iana's heart swelled with relief. She had survived the night, survived the forest, survived the fear. And she had been rescued by someone who had appeared at just the right moment, guided perhaps by fate or sheer courage. As she looked back at the forest, she felt a mixture of fear and respect. The forest had tested her, but it had also taught her lessons she would never forget. She had learned courage, patience, observation, and hope. And she had learned that even in the darkest moments, help could come from unexpected places. That morning, Iana walked with the rancher toward safety, feeling a small spark of joy in her heart. She knew she had survived something terrifying, something that could have ended her life. Yet here she was, alive, breathing, and full of hope. She realized that the world was full of dangers, yes, but also full of people capable of great courage and kindness. And she was determined to carry that lesson with her forever. The first light of dawn stretched across the plains, painting the tall grass with a golden glow. Birds began to sing, and the wind carried the sweet scent of wildflowers and earth. Far from the village, a rancher named Caleb rode slowly along the trail, inspecting his cattle. He was a tall, strong man, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that seemed to notice every small detail of the land around him. Life on the plains had taught him patience and observation, skills that would serve him well today. Caleb was used to riding alone, thinking about the land, the weather, and the challenges that came with ranching. His horse moved steadily beneath him, hooves crunching softly on the dry ground. Yet, amid the familiar sounds of the plains, a faint sound reached his ears, a small, weak cry carried by the wind. At first he thought it might be an animal or perhaps the wind itself, but there was something unusual about it. The sound had urgency, fear, and hope all mixed together. He stopped his horse and listened carefully. The cry came again, soft but desperate. "Help, please," Caleb's heart tightened. He had heard enough to know it was a human voice and one that was in trouble. Without a second thought, he spurred his horse forward in the direction of the sound, moving cautiously but quickly. Every step brought him closer to the source, and every sound made him more alert. He scanned the landscape, noticing the movement of the grass, the shadows cast by trees, and the distant shapes in the forest. The cries grew louder as he approached a dense cluster of trees at the edge of the forest. Caleb slowed his horse, dismounting carefully to avoid making too much noise. He crept forward, using the trees and bushes for cover until he saw her, a young girl, tied to a tree, her small body trembling. Her wrists were red and raw from the ropes, and her eyes were wide with fear. Her hair was tangled, and she looked as if she had been there for hours. The forest around her seemed alive with danger, and in the distance, Caleb could see the shadows of wolves moving cautiously, drawn by the scent of fear. Caleb's heart raced, but he remained calm. He knew that sudden movements could provoke the animals. He scanned the area quickly, noting the positions of the wolves and any other threats. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and reached for his rifle, keeping it low and ready. Every second counted. One wrong move and the girl could be hurt, or worse. He whispered softly to her so she could hear, but not the wolves. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to help. Stay still." Yana's eyes widened when she heard his voice. She had been alone for so long, surrounded by danger, that a human voice sounded almost like a miracle. She tried to nod, but her body was stiff from fear and exhaustion. The rancher moved carefully, his eyes never leaving the shadows where the wolves lurked. He took slow, deliberate steps, positioning himself between the girl and the approaching danger. The wolves growled softly, testing him, but he stood firm, showing no fear. Caleb knew he had only one chance to act. He raised his rifle slowly, aiming at the largest wolf that had crept closer than the others. His hand was steady, his breathing controlled. With a single, precise shot, the wolf fell and the other animals scattered into the trees, disappearing into the forest. Yana's relief was immediate. She could hardly believe her eyes. The forest, which had seemed so full of terror just moments before, was suddenly quieter. The immediate danger had passed. He rushed forward, cutting the ropes that bound Ayana with his knife. She collapsed into his arms, shivering from fear and cold. Caleb held her gently, speaking softly to calm her. "It's okay, little one. You're safe now." "I've got you." Yana's small hands clung to him as she tried to steady her breathing. She could barely speak, but a whisper escaped her lips. Thank you," Caleb nodded, understanding her exhaustion and fear. "You don't need to thank me now." "We need to get out of here first," he said. Carefully, Caleb guided Ayana out of the clearing, keeping his eyes on the forest for any remaining threats. She leaned against him, too weak to walk on her own. As they moved, he noticed the way her small body trembled, not just from cold, but from the hours of fear and tension she had endured. He knew it would take time for her to recover, but she was alive, and that was the most important thing. The path back to safety was not easy. The forest was thick and every step had to be measured. Caleb spoke softly to Ayana, trying to calm her and give her confidence. "We're almost out. Stay close to me. You're doing great." Ayana nodded, trusting him completely. She had been alone, scared, and uncertain, but now she had someone guiding her, protecting her, and it gave her a small but powerful sense of hope. As they moved, Ayana began to notice the beauty of the forest again. The way the sunlight filtered through the branches, the gentle rustle of leaves, the songs of birds waking to the morning. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel calm, to breathe freely, and to believe that she would survive. The fear was still there, a shadow behind her, but it no longer controlled her. She felt strong, not just because Caleb was there, but because she had survived the night, faced danger, and had not given up. The morning air grew warmer as they neared the edge of the forest. The plains opened up before them, stretching endlessly under the brightening sky. Caleb led Ayana carefully to a safe spot where she could rest. He knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. Her wrists were raw, but nothing was broken. Her body was exhausted, but her spirit was intact. He offered her some water from his canteen, and she drank slowly, savoring the cool relief. "You're very brave," Caleb said gently. "You stayed calm even when it was hard. That's how you survived." Ayana looked at him, her eyes wide, and nodded. She felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and pride. She had faced a terrible situation, but she had endured. She had survived. And now she realized she was safe because of the courage of another person, someone who had risked his own safety to save her. Caleb helped her stand, and together they began the walk back toward the nearest settlement. The sun climbed higher, warming their backs, and the forest behind them seemed less threatening now, almost peaceful. Yana's small hands clung to his, and she felt a sense of trust she had not felt in hours. She whispered softly, "I won't forget this." Caleb smiled gently. You won't have to, but remember, courage and hope are things you carry with you always. As they walked, Caleb told her about his own life on the plains, the long days of caring for cattle, the quiet nights under the stars, and the importance of paying attention to the land and the animals. Yana listened, fascinated, and slowly, the tension in her body began to ease. She realized that while danger existed in the world, there was also kindness, bravery, and care. There were people who would risk everything to help someone in need. By the time they reached the edge of the plains, Ayana's energy began to return. She could see her village in the distance, the familiar shapes of the homes and the people moving about. Relief flooded through her, and tears came to her eyes. She turned to Caleb, trying to express the gratitude she could not put into words. He nodded, understanding her perfectly. "Go to your family now," he said gently. "They will be very glad to see you." Yana ran the last few steps toward her village, her heart full of emotion. Her family noticed her immediately and rushed to embrace her, tears of relief streaming down their faces. She told them a little about what had happened, enough to make them grateful and cautious, but she left out the worst of the fear she had felt. Caleb watched from a distance, feeling satisfaction and humility. He had done his part, and now it was time for the family to take care of her. That day, stories spread through the village about the bravery of the rancher and the courage of the young girl who had survived. Yana's experience became a lesson in hope, strength, and the unexpected ways help can arrive. She knew she would never forget the forest, the fear, or the man who had come to her rescue. And as she grew older, she would carry these lessons with her, remembering the night when she faced danger and the morning when courage and kindness saved her life. The sun was high in the sky, casting warm light over the plains, when Caleb finally guided Ayana to a safe spot on the edge of the forest. The danger had passed, but her small body still trembled from fear, exhaustion, and the cold night she had endured. She sank to the ground, resting against a large rock, and Caleb knelt beside her, carefully examining her wrists. The ropes had left deep marks, but thankfully there were no serious injuries. He cleaned the cuts with water and gently wrapped them with a clean cloth he carried in his pack. "You're doing very well," Caleb said softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "You stayed brave through the worst night anyone could imagine. That shows how strong you are." Yana looked at him, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She had been terrified, trapped in the forest with wild animals nearby, yet this man, this stranger, had come at exactly the right moment to save her. She could hardly believe her luck. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her voice was hoarse from hours of shouting and fear. Finally, she managed a small whisper, Thank you, you saved me." Caleb smiled gently and shook his head. "No thanks needed. What matters is that you're safe now. That's all I want." His tone was kind but firm, giving her a sense of security she hadn't felt since the capture. Yana shivered slightly, still feeling the chill from the long night. Caleb offered her a small blanket from his pack, which she wrapped around herself. The warmth against her cold skin was comforting, and for the first time since her ordeal began, she felt a flicker of real hope. She looked at him and realized that courage could take many forms. His courage had saved her, but her own courage, her determination not to give up, had also carried her through the night. As they rested, Caleb spoke softly, telling her about the dangers of the forest and the importance of paying attention to the signs around her. "The forest can be both friend and enemy," he said. "It gives warning if you listen, but it can also test you. You were smart, listening to the sounds and watching for danger. That's how you survived." Yana listened carefully, absorbing every word. She had felt alone and powerless, but now she realized that she had been learning, even in fear. Her instincts had guided her, and Caleb's arrival had been the final piece that saved her life. Slowly, Ayana began to regain some energy. Her body was still weak, but her mind was clearer. She looked around at the plains stretching endlessly before them, the sun brightening the grass, and the trees casting long shadows. The forest behind them no longer seemed threatening. In a way, it now felt like a place that had tested her, teaching her lessons she would never forget. She breathed deeply, taking in the scents of the wild flowers and fresh earth, feeling life returning to her body. Caleb helped her to stand, and together they began walking back toward the nearest settlement. Gianna clung to his hand, still a little unsteady on her feet. The warmth of the sun and the rhythm of his stride gave her courage. As they walked, Caleb told her stories of life on the plains, the long days of tending cattle, the quiet nights under the stars, and the lessons he had learned from nature. His voice was calm and steady, a steady anchor after the terror she had experienced. She listened to him, fascinated, and slowly, the tension in her body began to ease. She realized that while the forest had been dangerous, it had also been full of lessons. She had learned patience, courage, and the importance of observing the world carefully. She had learned that fear could guide her if she used it wisely, rather than letting it control her. And now, with Caleb's help, she was learning that human kindness could also be a source of strength. The closer they got to the settlement, the more Iana began to recognize familiar landmarks. Her heart leapt with relief as she saw the outlines of her village in the distance, the small homes, the smoke rising from chimneys, and the familiar shapes of people moving about. She could hear voices calling in the distance, and she realized that her family must have been searching for her. Tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of joy and relief. She had survived the night, and now she would be reunited with her family. Caleb guided her to a safe spot where they could rest before entering the village. He knelt beside her again and said gently, "Once we get to your family, everything will be okay. You're safe now, and they will be so glad to see you." Iana nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. She had been alone, afraid, and uncertain, but now she understood the value of hope, courage, and the kindness of others. She realized that even in the darkest moments, help could arrive when it was needed most. As they approached the village, Iana saw her family running toward her, their faces full of worry and then relief. Her mother embraced her tightly, tears streaming down her face. Her father held her hands, checking to make sure she was unharmed. Her siblings crowded around, asking questions and hugging her in turn. Iana's heart swelled with emotion. She had been through a terrifying ordeal, but she was home. She was safe. She was surrounded by people who loved her. Caleb stayed back, giving the family space, but Iana ran to him and held out her hands. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now. "You saved me." Caleb smiled, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "You were very brave too," he said. "Remember that courage and hope are things you carry with you always. You used them both tonight, and that's why you're alive." Iana nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had been brave, she had survived, and she would carry that strength with her forever. The villagers soon gathered around, listening as Iana and Caleb told the story of what had happened. They spoke carefully, leaving out the worst of the fear, but sharing enough to make the villagers understand the danger and the courage involved. The story spread quickly, becoming a lesson for everyone. A lesson in hope, bravery, and the importance of helping others in times of need. Iana's experience reminded them all that even the smallest person could survive great challenges with determination and the support of others. As the day went on, Iana rested with her family, recovering from the night of fear and uncertainty. Caleb stayed nearby, ensuring she was safe and comfortable. They shared food and water, and Iana listened as Caleb spoke of his life on the plains, his work with the cattle, and the challenges he had faced. She realized that courage came in many forms, not just fighting or running, but also helping, protecting, and caring for others. Caleb had shown that courage in action, and Iana knew she would never forget it. By evening, Iana's body was still tired, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, and she had survived. She had learned important lessons about the forest, about herself, and about the power of hope and kindness. She realized that life could be unpredictable and dangerous, but it could also be filled with courage, care, and unexpected heroes. She looked at Caleb with admiration and gratitude, knowing that his bravery had saved her life. The sun set, casting long shadows over the plains, and Ayanna felt a deep sense of peace. She was home, surrounded by family, and safe thanks to the courage of a stranger who had risked everything to help her. She thought about the lessons she had learned, about staying calm, observing the world carefully, and never giving up hope. She realized that these lessons would guide her for the rest of her life, helping her face challenges and dangers with strength and determination. As night fell over the village, Ayanna lay in her bed, wrapped in warm blankets, thinking about the events of the day. She remembered the terror, the fear, the cold, and the shadows, but she also remembered hope, courage, and kindness. She understood that life was full of challenges, but it was also full of people who could make a difference. She whispered a quiet promise to herself: "I will carry this courage with me. I will never forget the kindness that saved me. I will survive, no matter what." And with that promise in her heart, she drifted into a deep sleep, knowing that the night of fear was over, and a new day filled with hope and possibilities awaited her. She had survived, she had learned, and she had been shown the strength of human kindness, the kind that could change a life in an instant. The days that followed Ayanna's return to the village were filled with relief, warmth, and quiet reflection. She had survived a terrifying ordeal, and now the love of her family surrounded her. Her mother insisted on tending to her every need, preparing food that would strengthen her body and soothe her soul. Her father helped her gently move about, making sure she could regain her strength without strain. Her siblings hovered nearby, full of questions, yet careful not to overwhelm her. Ayanna felt a sense of safety she had not known for days. Even as she recovered physically, her mind remained active, replaying the events of the forest, the capture, and her rescue. She thought of the fear that had gripped her, the loneliness that had weighed on her heart, and the sounds of the forest in the dark night. But she also thought of the courage she had found within herself, the way she had stayed alert, observed the animals, and refused to give up hope. Most importantly, she remembered Caleb, the rancher whose bravery had saved her life. She could not imagine where she would be without him. Ayanna began to tell her story to the villagers, speaking carefully so as not to frighten anyone, but also to share the lessons she had learned. She spoke of the forest, the animals, and the ropes that had bound her. She spoke of fear, but also of patience, careful observation, and determination. The villagers listened, captivated, learning from her experience. Children clung to every word, imagining the courage it took to survive alone in the forest. The adults nodded, reminded of the importance of vigilance, care, and helping one another in times of need. News of Caleb's heroism spread quickly through the village and beyond. People spoke of the rancher who had risked his own safety to save a child. They admired his courage and his calm, careful approach to danger. Caleb, however, remained humble. He never sought praise or recognition. To him, it was simply what one did when someone's life was in danger. But even so, his actions became a story that inspired others, a tale of human kindness and bravery that would be told for years to come. As Ayanna regained her strength, she reflected on the lessons she had learned from the night in the forest. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. She understood that hope was a powerful force, guiding people through even the darkest times. She knew that human kindness could appear unexpectedly, changing lives in ways that could never be forgotten. And she learned the importance of observing the world, paying attention to details, and using intelligence and patience to survive. One afternoon, Caleb returned to the village to check on Ayanna. She greeted him with a smile, her eyes bright with gratitude. "I wanted to see how you were doing," he said simply. "You've been through a lot and I wanted to make sure you're okay." Yana nodded, feeling the warmth of his concern. "I'm much better now," she said. "Thanks to you, I'm alive." Caleb shook his head, smiling gently. "You were brave too, never forget that. Courage and hope saved you as much as my actions did." Over time, Ayana's experience became more than a story of fear and rescue. It became a story of growth, learning, and resilience. She began to help others in her village, sharing her knowledge of the forest, the plants, and the animals. She taught younger children how to recognize danger and stay safe, passing on the lessons she had learned firsthand. The villagers came to see her as someone wise beyond her years, not just because of her experience, but because of her ability to reflect on it and help others. Yana's relationship with Caleb grew into a deep bond of respect and trust. Though he was older and a stranger when they first met, she came to see him as a mentor and a friend. He continued to teach her about the plains, the ways of the land, and the importance of observing and understanding the world around her. Through his guidance, she developed confidence and strength, learning not only to survive but to thrive in her environment. Years passed, and Ayana grew into a young woman full of wisdom and courage. She never forgot the night she had been tied to the tree, the fear that had threatened to overwhelm her, or the moment when hope arrived in the form of a single, brave rancher. Those memories shaped her into someone strong, compassionate, and determined. She faced challenges with the knowledge that fear could be overcome, and that courage and hope could carry her through anything. The village continued to thrive, and Ayana's story became part of its history, a tale told to children as they grew up, teaching them about bravery, survival, and kindness. People remembered Caleb's actions with admiration, and Ayana carried the lessons of that night with her throughout her life. She knew that life was unpredictable and sometimes frightening, but it was also full of opportunities for courage, kindness, and learning. Even as she grew older, Ayana often returned to the edge of the forest where it had all begun. She walked among the trees, observing the animals, feeling the wind on her face, and reflecting on the lessons she had learned. The forest no longer seemed threatening. Instead, it felt like a place of growth, a reminder of the strength she had found within herself and the unexpected hero who had helped her. She felt gratitude for the challenges she had faced, knowing that they had shaped her into the person she had become. Yana's life continued with a sense of purpose. She worked to help her community, using the skills she had gained to teach, protect, and guide others. She became a symbol of resilience, showing that even the smallest and most vulnerable could face great challenges and emerge stronger. Her story inspired courage in others, encouraging them to face their fears, observe the world carefully, and act with kindness and wisdom. In quiet moments, Ayana often thought of Caleb and the day he had saved her life. She remembered the precise, calm way he had handled the danger, the reassurance in his voice, and the steady presence that had guided her out of the forest. She understood that his bravery had been extraordinary, but she also realized that her own courage had played a vital role in her survival. Together, their actions had turned a terrifying situation into a story of hope and heroism. As she grew older, Ayana told her story with pride and humility, always emphasizing the lessons she had learned. She spoke of fear, but she also spoke of courage. She spoke of danger, but she also spoke of hope. She spoke of her rescue, but she highlighted the importance of patience, observation, and determination. Her story became more than a tale of survival. It became a guide, a source of inspiration, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, human courage and kindness could shine through. The village remembered the night as a turning point, a story that taught lessons to everyone who heard it. Caleb continued his life as a rancher, respected by all, yet humble in his deeds. Yana grew into a woman who carried the strength of her ancestors, the lessons of her own experience, and the wisdom of the man who had saved her. Together, their story endured as a testament to hope, bravery, and the power of human kindness. Yana understood more than ever that life was fragile and unpredictable. Yet she also understood that courage, determination, and hope could make the difference between despair and survival. She learned that kindness from others could change lives, and that the smallest acts of bravery could have lasting impact. These lessons became her guide, shaping her decisions, her actions, and her outlook on life. Even many years later, when she had children of her own, Ayana would tell them the story of the night she had been tied to the tree, the fear she had felt, and the courage she had found. She would tell them about Caleb, the rancher whose bravery had saved her life, and about the importance of staying calm, observing carefully, and never losing hope. Her children would listen, wide-eyed, learning from her experiences and the lessons she had carried through her life. Through it all, Ayana remained grateful, not only for her survival but for the opportunity to grow, learn, and help others. She had faced the worst of fear and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Her story became a part of the village's history, a tale told to generations, inspiring courage, hope, and kindness in everyone who heard it. And in her heart, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same bravery, determination, and hope that had carried her through the forest that fateful night. Yana's journey had begun with fear and danger, but it ended with strength, learning, and hope. She had survived not only because of the bravery of another, but because of her own courage and determination. The night tied to the tree became a symbol of her resilience, a reminder that life, even when terrifying, could also teach lessons, bring growth, and reveal the extraordinary power of human kindness.